Welcome to the Rotowire DFS podcast brought to you by FanDuel.com, the leader in one-day fantasy sports. I'm your host, Josh Hayes, joined as always by Benny Ricciardi as we break down the Saturday NBA DFS slate. You can always find Benny on Twitter at BennyR11 and over at RotoCurve, Rotowire, and as a featured writer in the DraftKings playbook. And you can also follow me on Twitter at JoshHayesFS. The Rotowire DFS podcast is available on iTunes and Stitcher, now live streaming on Google Hangouts. And you can also check us out on the official Rotowire YouTube channel. So make sure you press that subscribe button. Let us know that you enjoyed the show. Benicio, welcome to another ginormous NBA slate here for Saturday.
Yeah, I'm still licking my wounds a little bit from last night. I had a lot of Kawhi Leonard exposure over on sites that don't have late swap. Not that it really mattered though, because I had Kawhi exposure on DraftKings as well. And by the time they actually came down with that news, you know, if you didn't have, if you had him in the forward spot and you didn't already have LaMarcus Aldridge in your lineup, you could have just switched to Aldridge, although that didn't work out really well either. But I actually had him stuck in the small forward spot because I had two power forwards that played already, so my forward spot was used up. And I wound up having to leave $3,000 on the table and going all the way down to Wes Johnson was the, only viable candidate that you could have swerved to. So needless to say, it was not a good night to kick off the second half of the NBA season for me in DFS.
Yeah, I definitely hear you there as well. I was sitting there in first place on our collaborative lineup that we used there as well, and the way it goes, just like on FanDuel, you late swap Kawhi Leonard, see ya when I want to be ya. Thanks for the information, San Antonio Spurs, on how Kawhi Leonard wasn't even close to playing that game, but let's just wait till 7 p.m. West Coast time to release that, so everybody can get torpedoed together. So that was awesome. But that's the way the DFS goes. So we're ready to bounce back here with some Saturday action. Like we always do, we record this show 36 hours in advance. So if you're live streaming, you're wondering why we're talking about Saturday, or you're checking out the YouTube channel, or you're you're subscribed on the podcast as well. We tried to give you as much time as possible. One of the only podcasts that I know of out there that puts out the information 36 hours in advance for you to get as much prep time as possible. So just take that into account and keep that in as a factor if we happen to mention a player that gets late scratched for the Saturday slate. So let's go ahead and jump into the point guard position here for Saturday. We've got 4 games on tap: Washington at Miami, Milwaukee at Atlanta, the Knicks and Porzingis against the Big Cat in Minnesota, and then the Golden State Warriors playing back-to-back against the LA Clippers. Your top picks here at PG.
Yeah, I think the guy who I like the most is going to be Chris Paul on the day. John Wall is actually playing his 3rd game in 3 nights, so I'm not really a big fan of that. He's also going up against Miami, which is a team that plays a very slow pace. I don't know how good defensively they're going to be because you got to assume at least Chris Bosh is out. You probably get Whiteside back from that 1-game suspension. But I just don't think it's a good spot for Wall. So really, I think your choice at the top end comes down to who you like better between Chris Paul and Steph Curry. You get a little bit of a discount on Chris Paul. You know that he's a very important piece to their team anytime they're in a game that, they got to win. And against Golden State, I think they're going to need him to do as much as possible. He had 59 fantasy points in a game earlier this year against Golden State. So he does have a good history going up against Steph Curry, at least this season so far. And if I have to choose between Chris Paul and Steph Curry, I think there's more upside with looking at Chris Paul. Plus, you get a little bit of a discount on him over Steph Curry. So I think Paul's going to be my top option at the point guard on Saturday.
All right, I like Chris Paul there as well. Obviously, we take a look at this matchup. We know that there's going to be good value for Curry and Paul, but I'm always willing and interested in taking the discount that's available for a comparable player to, and according to some of the numbers and the projections that we take a look at too, Chris Paul is actually the higher projected producer, and that doesn't surprise me too much, given that he's had to shoulder so much of the load with the players like Austin Rivers, Blake Griffin, and the like out of the lineup. So filtering down from Chris Paul here, who else are you sort of taking a look at getting exposure to at the point guard position for Saturday?
Yeah, I don't really love much at the lower end. I think Rubio against the Knicks is a pretty decent spot. So his price, let's see what his price is at. Yeah, he's about 7K over on FanDuel, so it's not exactly a bargain, but he would be somebody I'd be looking at. I like Goran Dragic a little bit as well. We know Washington is a team that plays at a fast pace, so this is going to be a paced-up game for him. He's a little bit below 6K. I think you can get 25 to 30 fantasy points out of him, which would be 5X for him at his price. So Dragic is somebody else that I'm taking a look at. Other than that, though, I don't really know. I mean, I wanna take a look at Michael Carter-Williams, especially if Bayless is going to be out. But I don't trust anybody on Milwaukee as long as Jason Kidd's coaching them right now. I had guys sending me questions on Twitter today about using Greg Monroe, and I don't know. With Kidd as the coach, the only guys that I think are safe, Middleton's got a safe 38 minutes on that Milwaukee team, but other than that, I mean, he's shown that he's going to rotate Parker and Monroe in and out of games. For some reason, he's not a fan of Michael Carter-Williams. There was talk about him looking to, bring in other point guards at the trade deadline, Rubio being one of the guys that apparently Jason Kidd loves. So I don't know. I just can't really trust anybody else below maybe Dragic. So Dragic and Rubio would be the two cheaper guys that I think I'd be looking at.
Yeah, that's interesting that he loves Ricky Rubio, because Ricky Rubio is shooting about as bad as Jason Kidd used to shoot from the field, earlier on in his career. So that would be like, oh yeah, of course Rubio is a kindred spirit for you, because he's a great passer like you always were. The difference was that Jason Kidd could rebound and play defense, and Ricky Rubio absolutely cannot. So for me, I think I want to get some exposure to Jeff Teague. I'm a little bit disappointed that Atlanta failed and didn't make the trade with Dennis Schroeder, but regardless of that, Jeff Teague has been playing at a pretty high level overall, and I'm also, by the way, okay with Michael Carter-Williams since Jared Bayless is considered doubtful at this point with that knee issue that he currently has. So if you want to get some exposure to MCW, I like that. Jeff Teague to me is a guy who's been playing at a higher level and is in a very reasonable price of FanDuel. 6,300 was the last price tag he hit. He scored 38 FanDuel points and produced 6X against the Chicago Bulls there as well. So I think that's somebody that I definitely don't mind targeting down below that in a game that I believe should have a fair amount of pace on the Milwaukee side, which should help Atlanta out just a little bit here. So if I'm not paying up for Chris Paul, Jeff Teague, and Michael Carter-Williams, I'm fine residing in that range overall. Gordon Dragic, I think, is going to get pushed into playing with more pace, although Miami is notorious for playing snail ball like the Utah Jazz is as well. So if I'm fading Chris Paul or just trying to pare down from him on FanDuel at my second point guard position, Jeff Teague's probably going to be my number one option, then MCW, then Gordon Dragic. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the shooting guard position here and talk about what you're going to do at the 2.
Yeah, I like Dwayne Wade a lot, especially if Chris Bosh is out. You know that he's going to have to do more of the scoring for that team. Washington with that high pace, we know that they haven't been able to stop anybody on the wing this year. So I think this is a pretty good spot for Dwayne Wade. So he's somebody I'm looking at. I also like Klay Thompson here a little bit. Going up against the LA Clippers, he's going to draw a lot of JJ Redick defense. Redick's a pretty good shooter. He's actually not as horrible a defender as some people make him out to be, but I still think it's a pretty decent spot here for, Klay Thompson. I think the Warriors are going to score a lot of points. And like I said, I think it's a tougher spot for Steph Curry. So if I have to choose one of the Splash Brothers, I think I'm going to go with Klay Thompson here. And then from there, you go down to like the 5,000 range, which I think is an interesting thing for us to talk about today. You have guys like your boy Zach LaVine, who's down there going up against the Knicks. Not necessarily a high-pace, high-scoring game, but LaVine is under 5K. He's been getting you 20 to 25 fantasy points lately. You have JJ Redick down there in that range at 5K as well. And then you also have Jamal Crawford, who is about 5K as well, too. So you have those three guys that are basically the same price down there at about 5K. Of those three, like how do you kind of, settle those guys out? Because Redick's the guy who probably has the safest minutes, although he's very scoring dependent. It's pretty much the only stat he gives you. Jamal Crawford also does a lot of scoring, but he gets you a couple of the other stats too that can help you out. And then Zach LaVine kind of gives you a little bit of everything across the board. But again, he's a guy that's, coming off the bench at this point and, not playing huge minutes. So For the top end, I like Wade and Thompson. The bottom end, I'm still trying to parse my way through those other three guys.
All right, yeah, for me, I think Jamal Crawford is the most interesting player because of the price point and because the pace that Jamal Crawford is like a kindred spirit when it comes to the Golden State Warriors. Like he plays the way the entire Golden State Warriors team plays, which is like, super fast paced and wants to shoot a three every time down. He'd actually probably get some pretty good looks on this team if he played for the Warriors, but he doesn't. So he has to sort of manufacture it and do it on his own in Golden State. Against Golden State on Saturday. So I like this, spot overall. You really only need about 26, 25 points in the 5K range for him to meet value. And you take a look at the scoring that he's provided there. We're talking about 18 points or more in every game since January 31st. So he's been rolling at a pretty good clip. Is expected to get to have to shoulder even more of the load. Now that Austin Rivers is out of the lineup, he would have played more minutes if they didn't house the San Antonio Spurs on Thursday, which is actually maybe a good thing for him because a little bit less wear and tear for him and should be ready to go for Saturday. Although he's had plenty of layoff already as it is, so fatigue should not be a factor. But so yeah, Jamal Crawford I would prioritize first. JJ Redick is probably another top target, but knowing that the Golden State Warriors have pretty good defense, I think that they can sort of focus in a little bit on JJ and say, hey, this is the guy that we need to sort of shut down aside in terms of starter scoring aside from CP3. So I'm a little bit less optimistic about them, although you do like attacking Klay Thompson in this spot probably over almost anybody else on the defensive end for Golden State. So I would probably prioritize Crawford, Redick, and then was it Zach LaVine was the third guy for you, or who was their third?
Yeah, those were the three in that like 5K price range that I was looking at.
Yeah, I'm fine with that there as well. I'm also okay with Bradley Beal, but probably a little bit to a lesser extent because he is at least $1,000 more expensive. And he's been playing a fair amount of minutes overall. This is not bad value for 23 minutes of action against the Utah Jazz, and this game almost got out of hand there as well. They really didn't need Bradley Beal to play like the last 5 minutes of the game, although it looks like 14 points wasn't that bad. They were actually had like an 18-point lead or greater, and it was just basically killing clock the last 5 minutes against the Utah Jazz. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets back up into the 30-minute range and at least produces as a 20 real life point scorer in this Saturday matchup. So something else to pay attention to. Is it really three back-to-back games for the Wizards? Because like they almost never do that anymore in the NBA schedule.
Yeah, I don't know why it's set up that way, but they played last night, right? They played tonight against somebody else. I was just looking at it when I was looking at my lineups for they played Detroit on Friday night. They played Thursday night. They were one of the three games, the first day back, and then they play Miami now on Saturday. So
that's
3 days in a row.
Weird and strange that they would do that. So I would just take Bradley Beal off of my list for that reason overall. And to a lesser extent too for GPPs, I'm okay with Langston Galloway there as well, who's still been riding high for the most part with pretty good minutes. Definitely GPP only because the production level has been really wishy-washy overall, but you see what he's capable of in the 4,300 price tag. 29.5 points, 14, 5 and 5 with 2 steals is good for almost 7 times value. There as well. So definitely not a bad GPP swerve if you want us to go a little bit cheap and after spending up at the point guard and the shooting guard position with guys like Wade and CP3. All right, before we move on to the small forward position, I want to let you know that we still have the 10-day free trial available to all the fantasy listeners, watchers, and everybody else who follows us here with our information on rotowire.com. So all you have to do is go to rotowire.com/pod, get your 10-day free trial, get signed up. We've got great information for you if you're into esports. We've got a great paywall information that becomes free on the 10-day trial once you check that out. An NBA optimizer, NHL optimizer, college basketball, golf, soccer, Major League Baseball coming up. 8 different sites that we cover in our DFS optimizer tab to get the latest lineup information and projections. All you have to do is check it out, rotowire.com, free 10-day trial. Let them know that Josh and Benny sent you. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what you're doing here at the 3 for Saturday.
Yeah, I think if you have the money to spend up, I think Melo's going to wind up being the top scorer overall. He's actually been playing pretty well right before the All-Star break. He had, let's see, 49, 40, 35, 43, 35, 51 fantasy points in, the last 6 games that he started, which is pretty solid 4.5 to 5.5x, except for the 35-point game. In most of his starts out there. So I think he's a solid cash game play. I don't think he has the upside for tournaments, though. For tournaments, I would probably look to save. 2 guys who I have my eye on this, short slate are Kent Bazemore going up against Milwaukee. I think that's a pretty good spot for him. Guys on the wings have been doing pretty well. Bazemore's had 32, 34, 27 fantasy points, and then he had a bad game with 12 fantasy points against Chicago. So 3 of the last 4, he's put up, good numbers and returned like 6x value, 5.5 to 6.5x value for you. So he's one guy that I definitely have my eye on. And then the other guy, if I'm looking to save a little bit, I like Harrison Barnes in this matchup as well against the Clippers. He's back up to playing over 30 minutes a game, had, been averaging about 24, 25 fantasy points over his last couple games. He's at 4,400, which is incredibly cheap. So if you're looking for a guy that can save salary and give you some upside where he can get the 30 in a tournament and give you 6x or more on FanDuel, I think Harrison Barnes might be that guy at small forward.
Yeah, I like that call there as well. Prior to the Phoenix Suns game where he just went for 8 and 6, there 5.5 and 6.6x paid off on the price tag. A little bit riskier, probably maybe a better GPP play than it is a cash game play, but it's going to be very tough to go back to paying up for like Chris Paul and Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony. So you're going to have to find a swerve somewhere, and that's probably the best of the group as well. So that's something for us to pay attention to there as well. Yeah. And just below that, I'm not too crazy about the options. I don't want to use Jeff Green in the first game back. Shabazz Muhammad had been a guy that's under 4K now. So if you get into some trouble and you need to just jump into the spot, at least for a GPP or something like that, I'm okay with him because you really only need 20 fantasy points to meet value. You just got to be careful about how many value plays you roll into your lineup. You make sure you're pretty built up in terms of safety at the point guard and the small forward and the shooting guard position if you're going to go all the way down to Baz and in that spot. But we know that the New York Knicks don't play a ton of defense overall. So obviously Carmelo is going to be the top play. Antetokounmpo makes some sense, but I just don't know if I can trust his overall production. For every strong game that he produces, like 37 fantasy points, he pops up with like a 17-point game, or a 20-point game, which is not even close to anywhere, at 3x or anything like that. And he's been sitting at in the low to mid 7,000s overall. So just not trustworthy enough for me to feel good about that position. But just small forward in general is sort of like a wasteland down below Carmelo Anthony. So you're going to have to sort of pick your poison. And more than likely, I would probably just side with you and draw the line at Harrison Barnes. Keep tabs on Jeff Green to see what he does in his first game, potentially against the Golden State Warriors, and then throw Shabazz Muhammad in the back of my mind potentially if I want to use him too there as well. And Andre Iguodala is, I guess, a guy that you can sort of make a case for, but I never really try to use 6 men, no matter how much how much run they normally get, unless I know that they're a consistent 30-minute guy, and he's not that yet. Although he is probably the best of the second tier that's available.
Yeah. All right. Now we actually have a little bit of time to kill because there's only 4 games here. How are you handling these guys that just got traded over, like the Jeff Green situation? We also have Markieff Morris in his game with Washington tonight. Like, I kind of agree with you. I'm not using Jeff Green. I think he's going to play, but I don't think they're going to give him like big minutes in his first run. But I think that it takes him off the table and takes Wes Johnson off the table because, I think he's going to take minutes away from Wes. How do you feel about Markieff Morris and how that's going to affect guys like Otto Porter and Nene? And when would you start looking for that to happen? Like you said, you don't think so in the first game, with Jeff Green, and I'd assume it's probably the same with Markieff because it's the same way I feel. But how many games do you think it's going to take for them to get that guy into the rotation? And can you still use some of those other pieces who we think they're going to be stealing minutes from? And how do you think all that plays itself out?
Yeah. My thing here is everybody gets a 1-game suspension. for me. I want to see what they do with their minutes. You see what the plan was or currently is for Friday with Tobias Harris coming off the bench there. I mean, a lot of these probably, like, to me, I think that like most of these players need to start, like Jeff Green and Markieff Morris, because they have such a need for them, and they're such better options than the current rotation that's being rolled out there, like Paul Pierce or Bob Mute or Wes Johnson or whatever. So I expect that there to be some heavy usage and to be like a good level of production going forward. But I want to see it first. You never know what a coach is going to do when it's the first game off the team. I won't be surprised if any of those guys end up getting brought off the bench and being limited to 22 minutes or something like that, and you're never going to like that in your starting lineup. So I get a one game, sit your butt down, show me what you're going to do on that team, and then I'll reevaluate there afterward. You think that's fair?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way. I might even say longer than one game. Like, I think it's going to take a week or two for these guys to like fully settle into the role that they're going to have going forward. And like right now, there's just so much uncertainty around how it's going to be handled that I'm a little bit cautious about not only, I mean, I'm not using them at all, but I'm also a little bit cautious about using the guys who they're going to steal minutes from, because, we always talk about it all the time. If a guy's hurt and you're getting an extra 4 or 5 minutes out of somebody, that's a reason to start looking at him as a guy that can make value or have upside at his price. But we have the opposite situation here, where since somebody was added in, we might see 3 or 4 minutes less from all those guys. So if we're going to see a few less minutes from all those guys, I think it's going to affect them negatively. So I think that, for now, I'm kind of taking a wait and see approach with not only the new guys in there, but also the guys who play that position and had been seeing the bigger minutes already.
Yeah, I agree with you there as well. So, at least one game for me. And if it could easily get extended past one game if they get brought off the bench and I don't like what I see. The only way they get that one game suspension lifted is they ball out in that first game. And, like, all right, that guy looked good. Oh, he played 33 minutes and he was productive. So,
yeah, like as soon as I see one of those guys play 28 to 34 minutes, that range in there that we want to see them. If their price is right, then I'll be like, all right, well, if they did it in the first game, they're obviously going to, he's settled into that role now. He's only going to do that or probably more going forward. So that's about the time where, the guy goes back on my radar too, I think.
All right. Sounds good to me, Bob Barker. All right. Before we get into the power forward position, I want to let everybody know, for all the business owners out there, that if you need a website, why not do it yourself here with Wix.com? So no matter what business you're in, Wix.com has something for you, used by more than 75 million people worldwide. Wix.com makes it easy to get your business and your website live today. You need to get the word out about your business. It all starts with a stunning website. So with hundreds of designer-made, customizable templates to choose from, the drag and drop editor, there's no coding needed. You don't need to be a programmer or a designer to create something beautiful. You can do it yourself with Wix.com. Wix.com empowers business owners to create their own professional websites every day. So when you're running your own business, you're bound to be too busy to worry about the budget, the scheduling appointments, or building a website for your business. And because you're too busy, it has to be easy, and that's where Wix.com comes in. With Wix.com, it's easy and free. Go to Wix.com to create your own website today. The results will be stunning. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the 4 and tell me what you got here for your power forward position.
Yeah, I got to be honest, I don't really love anything here. Paul Millsap has been underperforming since, the death in his family. So that's, he doesn't really stand out to me as somebody that I love. Draymond Green's been underperforming a little bit lately too, although he has a great matchup against the Clippers, although apparently the Clippers are really good against power forward defense because they shut down LaMarcus Aldridge last night. So not really sure if I love either one of the guys up top. Porzingis has actually been playing pretty well lately, so he could be somebody I look for. Matchup against Minnesota, a little bit of a higher pace, but I don't really expect him to have a huge game. I'm actually looking, I think my favorite play, the guy who I expect to have the most exposure to, is probably Amari Stoudemire. Even with Whiteside back, as long as Bosh is out, they don't have a lot of big guys down there and with Miami. They just traded away the Birdman. Like we said, Bosh has that blood clot issue. Whiteside should be back for the Saturday game because he had the 1-game suspension, but I still think you're going to see some pretty big minutes out of Amari Stoudemire. His price is down there in like that 4K range going up against Washington. It's a fast pace. And I like him more than I like Nene Hilario, who's the other guy in that price range that you would probably look at. So I think that Amari and Nene both have a little bit of, both have a little bit of interest that I'm looking at them right now. But of those two, I think I'd rather go with Amari Stoudemire. I hate to say this, but he can actually play more minutes than Nene Hilario. So we found somebody who Amari Stoudemire at, age 36 with a bad back can play more minutes than on a consistent basis. So I think I trust him a little more than I trust Nene.
Yeah, the other problem too is if anytime you roster, I feel like this personally, I don't know, maybe this is true for you or it's not true for you, but like anytime I roster Nene Hilario, I have to listen to Watch Me Whip, Watch Me Nene, in the background, or I feel like I have to update all my team names to that. So I don't know if that's a positive or a negative for you. How do you approach that, Benny?
See, I'm not really sure how to answer that question right now. I would probably say unless he does what he did last night, because I mean, in his last two games, he's gone basically 6x and 7x. Mm-hmm. So at that point, at the end of the night, when I look at that, yeah, I'll be whipping and nay-naying myself. So I would like it if I could see that, but again, now that Markieff Morris is in there, he might get a few less minutes. This isn't really the greatest matchup for him against Miami, slow pace and all that. So I don't think there's a ton of upside with him when there's not really a ton of upside with him anyway. So
there's just there won't be any of this going on, is what you're saying.
But I mean, at 4K, which is the price he was at the other day, if he stays at 4,100, you need 21 fantasy points out of him, to make value, and anything above that is upside. Like I said, he went for 25 and 29 in his last two games, which was 6x and 7x. It's like I said, I don't really love him. If you're asking me, this is the lineup to save your life, or you're going to get a bullet in the head if you lose. I don't know if I could put him on it, but if you're looking for upside in the GPP, I definitely think that you can get some with him at only 4K.
All right, fair enough. For me, Gorgie Jang is going to be my value option that I like here overall. I'm definitely good with Amari Stoudemire. I think you're right on, and it's a good matchup in that front line that we don't have to worry about being terribly strong defensively. To me, my top option is going to be the splash cousin Draymond Green against the LA Clippers. I don't care that LaMarcus Aldridge got held down. That's got to be an aberration for me. You got to want to attack that power forward position. Whether it's Jeff Green or Paul Pierce, Bamuti, whoever they end up rolling into that starting rotation overall. That's just a terrible position defensively. And Draymond Green, if he does what he's capable of doing, should eat them alive. Definitely going to be expensive, but that's going to be my pay up guy and my pay down player, Gorgie Jang, who's been very safe there. Had played 41 minutes in 2 of the past 3 games and has hit double status with monster assist numbers too, 6, 4, and 7 assists in the past 3 games. To me, I think he's a must play at this point. I hope he doesn't get priced up too far above the 6,300 range, because he's providing supreme value overall and crushing, from a 6x up to 9x level over these past couple games. He's hit 9x twice since January 29th. So, to me, lock and load with Gorgie Jang here on the 4-game Saturday slate. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the center position and put a bow on the show with your top options here in the pivot.
Yeah, the guy I like most is actually somebody that I'm spending down for here. I don't think DeAndre Jordan's in a great matchup with the Golden State Warriors. His price has been coming up, so he's kind of expensive. I don't like Greg Monroe going up against Atlanta. I actually don't hate him, but his price is up to almost 8K. And I don't really see him having 40 to 50 point upside, especially with Jason Kidd as his coach messing around with the minutes. Karl Anthony Towns has been unbelievable lately, but I don't know if I love his upside in a slower pace matchup against the Knicks. So the guys that I'm looking at, I'm coming down to like Marcin Gortat, who had a pretty good game last time out against the Utah Jazz, which is one of the toughest matchups you can have in the league as a big guy. So if he can put up 50 against the Utah Jazz, I think he can do some damage against the Miami Heat that are going to be rolling Whiteside and, Amari Stoudemire at him. Also, don't hate Al Horford at 7,200, I think is what he was the last couple games, going up against Milwaukee. I think that's a decent spot for him. I don't think there's a lot of upside, but I think there's more safety there for a cash game. So I think Gortat's the guy I like for upside in a tournament at his price of 69, and Horford's the guy I like for safety at 72.
I think those are all fair calls overall for myself. I think we also need to remember to Hassan Whiteside. Miami does not play on Friday, if I'm correct. Is that correct, or is that not correct?
Did they play last night? No, they play
They
tonight. They play tonight because Whiteside's serving the 1 game suspension tonight, so he'll be in on the Saturday slate tomorrow.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that I had that right because I originally thought that he should have been available, but the latest information is still showing up talking about the suspension. So people just need to update their stuff. It's not on Rotowire. We don't have that crap. Okay, so I do like to check multiple sites to keep my projections accurate. But if you check out the Rotowire projection, you won't have that problem. Karl Anthony Towns against the New York Knicks, yes, sir. I think we've seen such consistency from him. Overall, it's just how can you not is I think the approach that we need to take. And then Hassan Whiteside too. I think is going to be in a super juicy spot, provided that he doesn't have any other outstanding issues like that overall. But it has to be a double lock in my mind. I think and you do get a little bit of a discount from Karl Anthony Towns, but I think I'm locking and loading there with Towns, and I don't want to really mess with the rest of the whole situation. Greg Monroe versus Al Horford defensively, and Al Horford, I'm still upset about his lack of rebounding overall. So I think that's where I'm going to sort of sit there and reside. And I don't know what's your approach with DeAndre Jordan against the Golden State Warriors? What's your thoughts there, by the way?
If he was cheap, there are places that he's still kind of cheap, like in the 7K range on some of these other sites. Where he's cheap, I think he's okay. He's been averaging 16 points, 15 rebounds, and 3 block shots like over his last 7 or 8 games. So those are pretty solid numbers that get you about 40 fantasy points. Now, I think Golden State is a tough matchup for everybody, but it is a faster pace matchup. Faster pace, more missed shots, more chances for rebounds maybe. Faster pace also helps him because he's a guy that finishes running up and down the floor with Chris Paul on the other end. So I think that he has an okay chance to reach value. I don't see this as being an upside game against him, though. I mean, as much as Golden State does play some high-scoring games, they do have a good defensive efficiency. They're not a very easy team to score points against. They're not a very easy team to rack up fantasy points against. So I'm off him on this game, and I'm somebody who probably plays DeAndre Jordan more than the average person does, especially in GPPs because of the rebounding and block shot upside that he has.
Yeah. I agree with you there as well. So the main thing here for us, and as far as we're concerned on FanDuel, just not enough value overall for me to be terribly interested in. And you are going to have to pay top dollar for Karl Anthony Towns, but I think he's going to be worth every penny overall. And if you want to go down below that, I'm actually okay with Bogut in cash games because I think he's going to have to play a fair number of minutes against a guy like DeAndre Jordan, since DeAndre Jordan should be a guy who gets a strong amount of run on the court. And so Bogut for me as a cheap cash option or, maybe a GPP flyer is a guy that I can sort of stump and make some sense for. But I really do want to roster Karl Anthony Towns and to a lesser extent Hassan Whiteside if I have the salary available to me. All right, and that's going to wrap it up for this week's row of shows for the Rotowire DFS show podcast. I don't know if podcast is fitting anymore because we're so interactive now. We're live streaming. We're on the official YouTube channel, so don't forget to if you just search on your YouTube page at Rotowire, it'll pop right up. You'll see our lovely faces available for you to hit that little red subscribe button. We definitely appreciate that. Don't forget, you can always check us out on iTunes and Stitcher. You can send any messages on Twitter to Benny at BennyR11 and check me out on Twitter at JoshHayesFS. And for all your other fantasy needs, regardless of which sport they are, it's at Rotowire to check out the latest information along with Rotowire.com. Thanks for watching and for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next week.